Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Let me just gently disagree with Liam Kerr. The person that really defeated Napoleon was a guy called George Scoville. George Scoville was Arthur Wellesley's code breaker. He broke Napoleon's Le Grand Chiffre, and thus, from the Peninsular Wars in 1812, the man who became Lord Wellington actually knew exactly what Napoleon's plans were. And perhaps in the modern world, the use of access to and protection of data is going to be equally important. And there are important things on the European stage that relate to that. GCHQ, which actually was the home of public key cryptography, Crookes and Cox were the original inventors, although now it's attributed to the 1977 MIT patent that went in the name of Rivest, Shamir and Edelman. The secrecy of GCHQ meant the UK was denied the commercial advantage and the intellectual opprobrium of the world for the invention of the software and the algorithms that continue to protect our data to this very day. We, of course, will not be in a position, if we cut ourselves off from the world in the way that appears to be the case, to develop both the means to make and the means to break cryptography. Because when we're dealing with crime, we need to be able to break into the codes and encryptions that criminals use. But equally, we need to be able to produce robust protections for our data, because that is at the very basis of our national security, more than the old arguments about hardware. The future will much more be about fighting cyber wars and cyber crime. With people coming to our universities from across the world to share their intellect and their ideas, we are in a position to develop the kind of protections that we need. With the cutting of ties with European institutions and the setting up of barriers allowing the free movement of people, we will not have the intellectual and multinational capacity to fight the world in the internet. And the internet is one of these things which, de facto, knows no boundaries whatsoever. It creates commercial and intellectual and cultural opportunity, but it equally creates threats to which we need to respond as well. The internet is, of course, a place with fewer rules than we would probably put in place if we developed it from scratch today. It enables people to spoof from whom emails come. It enables phishing attacks by spoof websites. And with the moving of Wi-Fi out to domestic things such as fridges and lights, the Internet of Things, as that is now called, it creates further vulnerabilities that require international collaboration. Only last week, there was an attack by a bot which had infected many of these domestic pieces of equipment via the internet and domestic Wi-Fi, and brought down the domain name server that allowed people to access Twitter. Now, there might be some of us who think having Twitter off the air for 4 or 5 hours was probably a very good thing indeed, but it is indicative of the threats that there are in the future from the kind of activities that can take place on the internet. So don't let's pretend that the world of the future is one where barriers are going to be more controllable than they were in the past. They will be more permeable than at any time in the recent history. And of course, terrorism is not a new thing. The founding of the special branch of the Metropolitan Police in 1883 was in response to the Irish Republican Brotherhood, a domestic terrorist organization in the United Kingdom, which included Ireland at that time. International terrorism, of course, existed too. Winston Churchill attended in January 1911 the Sydney Street siege, where Latvian revolutionaries who had been conducting a series of bank raids had holed themselves up, and Special Branch and the army were there to dig them out. Churchill claimed that there were lead bullets in his Astrakhan coat as he peered from behind the wall to see what was going on and got himself shot at. Whether that's true or not is perhaps a matter for some debate. In more recent times, we had the Balcombe Street siege in 1975, which again was Irish terrorism in London. We had the Baader-Meinhof gang in Germany, entirely domestic. We had the Red Gang in Italy, entirely domestic. So terrorism is something that both crosses boundaries, but equally can grow in communities that are not socially adept at responding to the changes that there are. We've just been through the 5th central government organised referendum. The first being, of course, in 1975, although there was a referendum on the League of Nations in 1934, but it was organised by the churches, although everyone in the UK did vote. This particular referendum, of course, is one that we're now discussing, the impacts on the justice system. But let's just go back and think what that referendum was about. The question on the ballot paper was a simple one. Should the United Kingdom remain, I paraphrase, remain a member of the EU, or should it leave? That was it. It was not a referendum on immigration. It was not a referendum on the single market. It was not a referendum on the European Convention on Human Rights. In fact, it was not a referendum that made any reference in the terms of the question we were asked to justice matters, to economic matters, a wide range of matters. Therefore, we should not read into the result that it tells us we should leave the single market. It does not read into the result that we should unsign the European Convention of Human Rights, which, as Claire Baker rightly reminded us, was very much the brainchild of Winston Churchill, then a distinguished Conservative member and former Prime Minister. So not even can we look at the vote and decide what it means. Margaret Mitchell told us we should not reveal anything about our negotiating hands. Well, if we go into the chamber where the negotiations take place with a blank sheet of paper, I predict we'll come out with a blank sheet of paper. Presiding Officer.